Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Thursday, February the 12th, the last day before recess. Another week you can legitimately say was the worst week for Keir Starmer. And we end as we began, embroiled in a row about Keir Starmer's hear no evil, see no evil approach to someone he wants to give a job to who has links to a paedophile. It's hard to fathom we're doing this for a second time again. On today's podcast, we'll tell you the story of the week, so stay with us. My name is Sam Coates of Sky News.
And I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico. But before we look backwards, Number 10's plans for a reset to go forward have stumbled to, just as the PM appeared to appoint Antonio Romeo to be Britain's most senior civil servant, a Mandarin from the past has popped up to denounce her, an attempt to wreck her candidacy. Sir Simon MacDonald, one-time Foreign Office boss, popped up to signal that he thinks she's unsuitable, giving an interview to Channel 4 News, calling for Number 10 to do more due diligence and suggest that she should undergo a proper vetting process.
Given everything, this feels like it could prompt a proper crisis, but I was having deja vu last night, Anne. Simon MacDonald was the ex-Mandarin who gave the interview in 2022 that accused Boris Johnson's Downing Street of not telling the truth over Chris Pincher that precipitated the collapse of that entire administration. MacDonald likes being a player. He likes his big moments, which some think isn't entirely appropriate for an ex-Mandarin, although others applauded the whistleblowing. I think for both of us, but certainly for me, this exploded all over my WhatsApps last night, but in multiple directions. Some wanting the Stop Romeo bandwagon and to jump on that. Others absolutely furious with MacDonald and suggesting that he was out of line for referring to essentially something that was dealt with many years ago, and the manner of his intervention was totally inappropriate. So who knows where this will go.
The Romeo appointment is the easy one for Starmer to make after that ouster of Chris Wormold. She was a contender last time. She's got the confidence of senior ministers from her time at Justice, recently alongside Shabana Mahmood at the Home Office. But MacDonald is bringing up an internal inquiry into allegations that arose when she was imposed as Consul General in New York in 2017. She was investigated over allegations that she had intimidated staff on that posting and reports of overly lavish spending as she did up the residency in New York and tried to boost brand Britain in a quite kind of glitzy way. Well, that was then all dismissed as a complaint by the Cabinet Office with no case to answer, so quite a strong dismissal there. But yes, it did leave frustration about the affair, and it did highlight the grey line between promoting the UK abroad and making sure that our presence was felt there and promoting herself. Now, I've known her for a long time, Sam, and Antonia Romeo, she's a very cheerful person. She's high profile, very well connected. She's unashamedly ambitious, and she's always said so. So in that sense, there is a bit of an undertone here that some of those attacks might be seen to reflect the kind of broadside that Lisa Nandy has brought up in another context of Number 10 about briefings, toxic briefings, as Lisa Nandy said in an interview last night, about Number 10 about women, but just an underlying sense of misogyny or wanting to stop high-flying women. And I think that is also in the background here. The playbook here's from a fan of Romeo. She's a disruptor. She represents the leadership the civil service needs. All the good stuff that you might want to hear if you're trying to get a job with embattled Starmer right now. No doubt, I think that in the end, the Prime Minister does intend to have her, but this draws out the process. And there is a question, is there enough due diligence if it's signaled that she's going to get the job ahead of that actually happening, especially when you've been in trouble over due diligence in other ways, no?
Look, this is the last thing that Keir Starmer needs as he tries to reset his team. He's trying to cling to anything to bring people together. That's kind of what I thought he was doing last night by jumping on the back of the comments by Ineos chair and Manchester United chair Jim Ratcliffe, who told my colleague Ed Conway that Britain had been colonised by immigrants. A very strong statement from the Prime Minister that it was offensive and wrong, and that'll play out today. That's the kind of thing that does bring the Labour family together. Notable, Farage has criticised Keir Starmer on multiculturalism. The Tories are sort of staying out at the moment. So I'd watch how everybody responds to that. But that's a sort of side issue. Let's get back to the present, Anne. And we want to sort of talk about the story of this week as we head into recess. My feeling is it actually got worse for Keir Starmer after Prime Minister's questions. Do you just want to sort of pick up where we are right now?
So where we are right now is everyone unpicking number 10's story about how they ended up appointing Matthew Doyle, former communications chief, to Keir Starmer when they knew, and now concede that Starmer also knew, that he had worked on a campaign for a convicted paedophile who was an old friend to become an independent councillor. That was after Sean Morton had been kicked out of Labour. Now, number 10 were relying on a pretty flimsy line, really, that there's no precedent for cancelling a peerage post-announcement when it's been conferred, only for clerks in their lords to say there would be nothing in law to stop them from doing just that. It's exactly the opposite end of the week, clearly, that they would have wanted to move on from anything involving paedophilia and the absolute abhorrence that unleashes. But Sam, have you got any inkling about what happened behind the scenes in the last few days? I mean, I think we've both got burgeoning notebooks, but take us through what you think happened.
The last 8 days have just been extraordinary, bookended as they were effectively by the same type of story, questions over whether or not Keir Starmer's hear no evil, see no evil approach to people he wanted to appoint to jobs who had links to paedophiles, which appears to have really rattled his premiership. The real crisis started at last week's Prime Minister's questions, where he admitted that he knew that Peter Mandelson had greater links to Jeffrey Epstein post-conviction, and built to the weekend. And here's the first thing I want to tell you about that I picked up this week, Anne. It's just how bad things got over the weekend. So we know that then Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney flew to Scotland to consider his future, and there are conversations between him and Starmer. Now, I heard that Keir Starmer never quite made a clean decision in his calls with McSweeney that he should go, which is why there was a lot of rumour and back and forth. And actually, Tim Shipman's excellent piece in The Spectator this morning reveals that McSweeney himself had to conclude, since I don't have your full confidence, let's call it quits. And so they decided to pull the plug. So the first thing I think I felt was that even last weekend, there was a lack of sure-footedness about what it appears that the Prime Minister wanted to do.
One thing that I think we've all been piecing together in the last couple of days is, what's the Prime Minister's own state of mind here? You'll be talking a lot about all of these other characters swirling around, and that Tim Shipman account and something that you've just said there reminds me that there doesn't seem to have been great clarity between two people who'd worked together very closely, the Prime Minister and McSweeney, when it came to having that final conversation, or the conversation that was going to push McSweeney into saying, pretty much, as far as I'm reading you don't have confidence in me, so I'm going to go. But really, what was Keir Starmer thinking then? So I was talking, because I think his own side of this hasn't really been as much illuminated. And I was talking to a close ally, someone in government who is close to him and personally so, who said, look, one thing not to underestimate here, he's been definitely on the ropes, but the one thing that Starmer really hates is being sort of outcompeted. And the idea that events have got out of his control. He said, and that is actually where this iron in the soul line sort of came from. Now, it can be written up and has been written up a lot as he's a bit indecisive. He didn't know whether he wanted McSweeney to go or not. But what we learned from that was that he was prepared to sacrifice McSweeney. Now, a few days on, seems all right. That's just one of those things. But at the time was really dramatic, wasn't it? On the Sunday, what it showed us was that Keir Starmer himself really wanted to go on, and there was going to be collateral damage to anyone who could be in the way of that. And I think the way the week turned out.
I think that really is fascinating. One of the things I think is going on, I picked up a bit of that too, but different people are projecting different attitudes of Keir Starmer onto him because they're not quite sure how he works. So Keir Starmer is at the centre of this drama. Some people think he's very decisive. I picked up another version of events. Now, this is what some parts of the cabinet thought were going on last weekend. They thought that Keir Starmer, I think there was a large chunk of the cabinet that genuinely believed last weekend that Keir Starmer was having a dark night of the soul and that we got much, much closer to him standing down than people realised. And that's one of the reasons that there was so much back and forth with McSweeney, that there were much bigger questions in play. There are all sorts of calls between cabinet members on Sunday, I'm told, as they tried to work out whether anyone was going to push Keir Starmer out the door because things was going so badly, or what they could do to support him. A lot of them acknowledging a simple fact, Anne, that they didn't really want Keir Starmer to go at that point, not because they don't think change is pretty inevitable, they do, but because nobody seemed ready, and they weren't sure, who would win or what would happen, and it would just usher in a reform government almost certainly in the future. So there was a sort of cabinet level shore up discussion for Keir Starmer going on because they thought that things were that bad in number 10. They would have been ready to fight a contest. Different wings of the party had that actually come to pass and Keir Starmer had gone. Interestingly, the cabinet minister who was most ready had Keir Starmer departed on Monday, I am told, to go, other than Wes Streeting, was Ed Miliband, and he was being pushed into the frame. He was the person least tainted with least kind of problems attached to his name. If it had all collapsed on Monday.
That's interesting, given his very vehement answers to the question that he's not intending to run at all, and writing that piece in the Times. I think more and more influence of Ed Miliband over policy might have been what was really in his sights here, but not ruling out anything for the future. For what it's worth, it's interesting when you say we are being briefed accounts of people, aren't we? So it's what people see is often what they want to see in someone. So the people I've spoken to around Ed Miliband was, no way was he ever thinking of challenging. Yes, he'd like to move policy a bit leftwards on some issues, but this is also a kind of framing, isn't it? That you're loyal at a crucial moment. If it comes around again, things could turn out differently. But one person people really knew would have liked to have maybe made his mark this week in a different way was Wes Streeting. He was not answering questions publicly on Monday about his support for the PM for a while, members of the government phoning around, journalists asking what he was up to. And as one cabinet minister put it, when we came to that Anas Sarwar moment and the run up to that, they thought there was an hour between Sarwar announcing that he was going to go for Keir's head and then the actual TV statement, which I certainly thought it kind of fizzled once it got into Scottish politics and blaming London for the state of Scottish Labour. That was not going to be enough to push out the Prime Minister. But there was certainly, I think, in the run-up to that, a sense that if Wes Streeting had his machine ready to go, that his moment was there. Now, we have not, we should say in fairness, heard fully from Streeting's own account of what he was thinking at that time. That he was obviously clearing up his own as he saw his texts with Peter Mandelson by getting them out there. But, how do you read what Wes was up to and maybe where it fits into what others were thinking, plotting or planning, Sam?
I think that there was a great deal of nervousness all over the place about what Wes Streeting was going to do. In fact, what he did do was an interview with my colleague Beth Rigby and published his Mandelson WhatsApps, but he wasn't making that clear internally, and I think that was ringing a lot of alarm bells, and there was quite a lot of feeling of bad faith around that, with the rest of the cabinet left totally in the dark about him. I think there's quite a lot of resentment towards Wes Streeting that I pick up loads of places through the week, and it has only grown and grown and grown. So what a lot of members of the cabinet did, they were getting silence initially on Monday through this crisis period from number 10. And so they began talking amongst themselves about a coordinated show of support. One figure said it's absolutely crazy that we worked out that the future of the Prime Minister hinged on planning to get the cabinet to write statements on the hate-filled Musk X platform, and whether or not we could get Shabana out of the Commons chamber to tweet. But that's exactly what cabinet members worked out they had to do, even before number 10 and the political director Amy Richards kicked in and summoned advisors to the cabinet room for a sort of war style operation. Everybody was dragged in, and there were I'm told lists of people that advisors from across government were just being asked kind of fairly forcefully to phone as quickly as possible to get them to tweet support for the Prime Minister. There was a particular fear that Labour mayors might be in on some kind of conspiracy, worries about what Sadiq Khan and Oliver Coppard might do. They fell into line after that. David Lammy turned up, Deputy Prime Minister, friend of the Prime Minister, in the Cabinet Room operation with the team to help the team. And at one point, he shouted that Angela Rayner had tweeted her support for the Prime Minister, and everybody in the room cheered. So it was, I think I hadn't I felt the drama and the chaos and the instability on Monday, but it's fascinating hearing just how chaotic it was inside government with different wings not knowing what they were doing and independently coming up with save Keir strategies. So that was very, very painful.
Amy Richards is the political director, number 10. I'm hearing it on the pro-Keir side of this, a lot of plaudits for her role in kicking in and getting this together, getting this impromptu call centre together, and the importance of Keir being, and I think initially there was an idea that he should not be too involved with that. He should be being prime ministerial and showing his leadership, and others should be hitting the phones for him. And that there was then a brief discussion, and I think Amy Richards was involved in that, maybe Jill Cuthbertson too. So no, you put Prime Minister, he's got to show skin in the game, everybody's in the fight together. He's in the trenches, was a phrase that was used, which tactically turned out to be a good idea. Then we flipped into political cabinet on Tuesday, and that was certainly one of the most bruising, even brutal, that the Prime Minister has had. I've been talking to a lot of women who were in and around that, and think what we heard subsequently from Lisa Nandy doing interviews, pretty much saying that she had told off the Prime Minister in private about the role of women. I think she had a moment to take her revenge, and she took it. She has been very, very badly briefed against. Some people don't think she's the right fit for her particular job there at Culture, Media and Sport. But even so, it's been very brutal. And I think she wanted to have that out there. So it sort of became, it's one of those workplace things where all the culture stuff that's bubbling along and that's gone really bad just all comes out in one go. So less political cabinet and more, here's time to get every skeleton out of the cupboard and just rattle it around of the resentments of people who didn't feel that they had been heard by Starmer and his number 10 operation.
It's as if the cabinet wanted to exact a price for having backed him on the Monday, and that price was to tell him what was what on the Tuesday. And I think you're absolutely right about Lisa Nandy. I heard she socked it to the Prime Minister and told him that it had been impossible to speak truth to power, brackets, while Morgan McSweeney was in that job, because views were dismissed, and pointed to all the cabinet members, female cabinet members around the table, who'd been briefed against. I don't think that there was a great deal of pushback. Pushback was coded from people saying, let's stick to the plan. Keir Starmer seemed to be sort of going along with the Nandy prospectus. Rachel Reeves, she essentially said that being Chancellor was the honour of her life and looked a bit broken about it all, but didn't really get stuck in. In private, I'm told she's telling people she just thinks the plotting is mad, that they've waited so long in opposition to end up in this place and will only allow in reform. She had well-timed birthday drinks last night. I do wonder, though, about just how well she's getting on with some of her cabinet friends. I'm told she's not impressed with Wes Streeting, whose leaked WhatsApp suggests that he was questioning her strategy. I wonder whether they are. I'm told that they are not as close as they once were.
Interesting, because they were, and he was very supportive to her. When she had her wobble in the Commons, and was one of the first people to reach out to her, like in a very personal way, as well as politically. No, I think Rachel Reeves did it, bubbling under this as well. There's a lot of separation creeping in between departments who are very frustrated. We'll talk about it another day. But Defence, John Healey, people saying, I've got pledges I have to fulfil here. At the Munich Security Conference, everybody's like, where's the defence investment plan that we were promised? We should speed along. We've got to do PMQs, because that was the box office moment there. And it was Kemi Badenoch absolutely lambing it, wasn't it, to Keir Starmer over his blind eye, as she framed it, or on Peter Mandelson, but also on Doyle, over consorting with paedophiles. I mean, we really got in the mud on that one. How do you think it ended?
I think that Kemi Badenoch had good lines, but maybe didn't land the argument as precisely as some might have done. There was a feeling immediately after PMQs that she'd actually let him off the hook despite the good rhetoric. It was the Tory operation behind the scenes that really caused the crisis around Matthew Doyle, because they'd done quite a lot of work and they were quite precise in their briefings afterwards about, the fact that Keir Starmer could have cancelled that peerage. There was nothing in law doing that. That was the sort of, I think, the best bit of the Tory operation yesterday. I don't think that Labour MPs will have gone home particularly happy after yesterday, though. There was also a women's PLP meeting with Keir Starmer. Some came out saying the Prime Minister had mansplained them.
Surely not. Could that ever happen, Sam?
The mood is just so rotten that I'm not sure that anything Keir Starmer could have said. I'm not sure whether or not he was mansplaining or just explaining. But at this point, people are sitting arms folded and unimpressed. But we just turn to the question of his and everybody else's future. And where do you think this goes now?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because it's such a broad charge, isn't it? The mansplaining. It's just pent up. That's the problem. This is so when he may be explaining and he's saying, I'm going to make a new start. I've got the message. Let's see how that goes in practice. But I think he feels he still needs to explain. His friends saying, he's so competitive. He's not giving up. This is the way that he sees it, not just as I'm fighting on till May because this is very embarrassing for Labour, that he feels that he's still got something to say. And at that point, arms folded kind of body language is what is around. And a lot of people are saying, I just don't want to hear this anymore. Maybe everyone needs to go away for a few days for recess. Just the most prominent woman in this saga, or not entirely in it, sort of on the side of it, but absolutely crucial here, Angela Rayner, in the rescue mission, the tweet, the cheer that you referred to that went up there. Now, the question is, what did she get in return for that? Just to remind ourselves, she couched her support when she came out in backing Starmer to deliver on areas which were clearly of importance to her. They were on her agenda, very much that union and leftish agenda. She also has a speech in Liverpool today, which is entitled "What We Need to See from Labour in the Future," which is quite on the nose. This is what I expect from the leader that I backed, and I think you can imagine the things that she will be pushing for. Now, my colleague Dan Bloom has heard more of the comeback plans from Ange. She's been saying privately she did not exchange a single text or a single WhatsApp with Peter Mandelson since that summer 2024 cutoff date for disclosure. So she's drawing a line between herself and West Streeting there. And he also has a dive into this kind of will she, won't she leadership campaign. And it would be scuppered if HMRC doesn't finish probing her taxes in time. So I think there's some frustration on her team about how long that is taking. What does she do then about this hole in her finances? A lot of people have pointed that out. She plans a small number of after-dinner speeches to help pay her tax bill. And she's chosen a ghostwriter for her memoir. So, there's quite a lot going on there between the lines. Oh, looks juicy. She's going to campaign for Anna Sarwar in Scotland. I'm sure Keir Starmer might be watching the phrasing in which that supportive campaign takes place.
Keir Starmer has had a dreadful week. He has not ended the week that much stronger than he began, even though the support from the cabinet allows him to limp on. We are now at the end of today heading into recess. He will come and join you in Munich at the security conference tomorrow, but we do not know where this will go. I mean, it's been an incredible few days. We will have to pause it there for this week. We will be back on Monday morning for Politics at Sam and it's recess. So we're just going to do it on Monday next week, unless something absolutely cataclysmic happens. But with Parliament away, that's less likely. But we will see you then with everything Anne has picked up from Munich, and I will be live from Lapland.
I shall try and catch up with Starmer over the white sausage. for which Munich is famed or notorious, depending on your views of these things.